KL Rahul was in control. The ball was soft. He had a set partner at the other end. And then there was sadness. This time we were spared the KL Rahul haunted, gormless look as he's dismissed. The one that makes him look like the best friend in the action film who has to die so he can be avenged. Or the political leader who gets ousted before his party can actually get elected. Or the boyfriend that you have before you find the one. This time we never saw that face because it was about the take. Nathan Lyon bowled short, KL Rahul tried to force it away, a thick outside edge flew, and usually it probably would have gone for runs past slip. Instead it is stolen in midair. Steve Smith launches himself at slip to intercept the ball and then clutches it between his fingers and his wrist to keep it. It would have been another sad story in the long tortured journey of KL Rahul if it wasn't for the fact that earlier Smith had dropped an absolute sitter off it. So maybe this is more like his new legacy, which is constantly complicated. But again, this was a really good innings from KL Rahul. And again, it wasn't going to mean that much with India so far behind. It wasn't epic or barnstorming, it was soft hands and a drop. And so often Rahul has made an important knock, but someone else has done better. Or he's batted well, but India has lost. And when he fails, and India do as well, that's also his fault. The glory that he should earn just never turns up. And yet the blame he isn't always due always seems to hover just above his head. Steve Smith allowed KL Rahul to be the hero, and then he just snatched it away. Another day in the haunted legacy of KL Rahul. A few years ago, I realized that trying to find the best stories in cricket was impossible for any fan. I even tried to get funding to make my own cricket Huffington Post. It never quite worked. But luckily, we finally have someone filling this massive void in our game. Best of Cricket. They scour the publications everywhere to find, quite simply, all the best news and the greatest stories on our sport. Then they make it just as easy. They either email it or WhatsApp it direct to you. Cricket's greatest tales delivered to your device. This is truly the best of cricket. This is a glorious way of showing how KL Rahul's career has gone so far. When he started off, he was seen as someone who could make runs only at home, because that's kind of exactly what he was. And then of recent times, he's found batting at home almost impossible, but has somehow turned himself into a touring specialist. This is such a bizarre pattern. Can he bat at home? Can he bat on the road? Has he made a pact with the devil at midnight to change what he is good at? None of us know. He was simply not allowed to be good at both things at once, like his career desecrated an ancient burial ground. And the narrative is always complex with him. But if you ask many Indian fans, they would say it is simply, KL Rahul is not good enough. And there are plenty of things that stick to him, like the word selfish. And when a billionaire owner suggests that about one of their own players, it's not going away. But of course, that was already the narrative, especially in the IPL. Rahul exploded in that tournament by taking everyone down. And then he spent years batting slowly for 16 overs, making a lot of runs, and then trying desperately to catch up the end with his strike rate. Essentially, in the world's biggest T20 tournament, he bats like the guy in the horror movie who starts to board up the basement before everyone is safely inside. And he's obviously talked about how part of this is down to his IPL teams having poor batters around him. But it's also clearly become a bit of a mindset thing with him. Then there was a time in the World Cup where he made runs against poor teams but struggled against good ones. That started a bizarre theory that it always happened, that somehow KL Rahul had never made runs against good teams, and all those other knocks we'd seen became ghost innings. It was easily refutable, but by that stage it was always a reason to doubt Rahul, so why would you even look into it? KL Rahul was someone who was selfish, not good against proper bowlers, and could only average mid-30s in tests. With Ishant Sharma and Ajiki Rahane out of the side, it meant the KL Rahul was offered up as a sacrifice to the Indian cricket netizens. None of this was helped by the fact that India used him as a utility batter. Essentially, they decided that he could bat anywhere, so his major use of them was appearing wherever there was a hole in their order. That actually shows how talented he is. Not that many players have the talent to slip in anywhere from positions 1 to 6 in the order. But his ability against pace and spin, and specifically the new ball, not to mention his backup wicket-keeping, means you can use him as the best bat not in your side, or as a handyman just plugging all the gaps. It makes him like a platonic sex symbol that can only ever let you down. He's like the dude in the zombie film with all the guns, but his starring role in the movie is to get eaten. And the problem with this is that kind of player doesn't actually have a role in the team. Even when they're in the side, it only ever lasts so long. You're a backup who either makes runs and still has to make way for someone else, or you come in, play a couple of matches, fail, and then disappear before ever being able to feel all that comfortable. To have a player of Rahul's quality as the 7th best batting option is absolutely huge. But most players in those roles average less because they're in and out of the side. They are constantly starting again, often in a new role, sometimes a new country, maybe sometimes not even having played that much cricket. Consistency of selection is a huge thing in any sport. And think about it this way. It was only recently that Rahul was told that he was going to be India's new number 5. He's already not that. He might bat at 3 in the next series or be dropped for a hotter, younger thing. He's constantly the outsider staring back in through the window at the perfect family. So all this means that Rahul hasn't played as many tests as he should. Only a third of his games are at home. He's now seen as a nearly indispensable member of their touring party, but at home, he's not even like the 7th choice batter at all times. So that we know there was a period when he made runs at home, and that has stopped. Perhaps because he was dropped too soon on wickets where no one was making runs. But there is something else that is interesting here. Rahul has played almost half of his career not at home, but in places with good bowling conditions or top quality attacks. Often both. Australia, South African and English pitches are 50% of his career. That is wild. And maybe playing all these games in these other areas is why he's got good at it. Because he's gone from an above average player at home to below. But completely flipped that in Australia, South Africa and England. KL Rahul is now more at home on these wickets that early on in his career he was absolutely truly awful at. But there was a time when he was a top player of the spinning ball in Asia. And that has gone. And now he is a great player of the seaming ball outside of Asia, despite being previously horrendous at it. Ajinkya Rahane had a similar transformation. It is not a normal thing to have happen in your career. So now we live in a world where India have dropped Rohit Sharma down the order to keep Rahul up. A few years ago, Rohit was one of the best openers in the world, albeit from a very shallow pool. But now KL is one of the best openers in the world, even though India were about to take him into this test series as their number 5. He has outscored the other Indian openers in his matches and destroyed the opposition. Those sentences just don't make any sense when you say them out loud. But maybe this explains KL Rahul better than anything else. He started tests by really struggling, so he tanked his average to begin with. Then he had 2 incredible years where he made a lot of runs in matches that others did not. The following 2 years, he was awful in very low scoring tests. He bounced back, he starred when he returned in 2021, before instantly having his worst year yet. Then in 2024, he's done very well, and again in what has been a very low scoring period. Let's just take a wider view. You see a player here who has had 4 great years of test cricket, but he's also had 4 terrible years, and only 1 has he been par. KL Rahul, the test cricketer, is either good or bad. He's binary. But it is hard to blame anyone outside of himself. Had he kept any form playing spin, or showed more of his talent against seam early on, he would have stayed around far longer and probably by this stage had a full-time role. When it comes to many of his issues, the call is coming from inside the house. But his main problem has always been that even when he's good, there always seems to be a caveat. He's good, but his average stays low because the wickets are tough. He makes runs in a World Cup final, but they're too slow. He's good, but the guy at the other end is better. He's good, but India were not, so it doesn't matter. Even when KL Rahul bats at his absolute best, there is something about him that is forever haunted. It took God and the demon to build international cricket, but don't tell Johnny Best that. 1882, Australia had played 1 test in England against the god W.G. Grace, and they sucked. So they were playing him again, and it was a tough wicket. But England was in front, so Australia was desperate for a 3rd innings lead. At number 8 was young all-rounder Sammy Jones. After a routine single, he walks down to do some gardening on the pitch. Grace whips off the bails and appeals. The ball wasn't dead, Jones was run out. The Australians were furious. In fact, some of the English players were also furious. But what Grace said went, and the umpires had already given it. Next in was Fred Spofforth. He was known as the demon fast bowler. He was furious, and he let England know exactly what was coming next, which was maiden. There's 12 maidens. I can't count them all. England only needed 85 to win. W.G. Grace made 32. England only 77. That was the test where the Ashes began. Buy my book, Overthrowing Cricket's Empire, on Amazon today.